So, Luke, how you been, man?
Been doing pretty good, man. Appreciate you having me on the podcast today. It's a pleasure, as always.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the invitation and hopping on here because there have been so many questions that I've been wanting to ask through our interactions that we had each other and just researching you and all that stuff. I know I got friends who are uh, big Star Wars fans.
Hmm.
And with that being said, I just want to read a piece of your bio. I'm not going to read your whole bio because I want to give you time to talk about yourself. But I just want everybody to know, reading off his website in his bio section, this paragraph here says that Luke has composed music for various genres, some of which include sci-fi, drama, and suspense thrillers. Additionally, Luke works with up-and-coming artists, producers, and directors in Atlanta and around the world. He enjoys working with others who have passion for film, TV, games, voiceover, technology, and media. Um,
Hmm.
what a paragraph in that bio section right there, and I haven't even covered I haven't even covered the whole gist of it. But Luke, please, if you can, just tell us about your background and where you started from, what made you want to get in this industry, and how you evolved your sound over time.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I actually love hearing the same answers to artists that I follow. Like John Williams, I always follow his beginnings and stuff like that. So I'm always happy to share. Um, I always like to say that music career is never a straight line. It's not one path for everybody and then you're in the music industry. It's usually has some twists and turns and some challenges along the way. And for me, that's obviously I'm no exception to that rule. And so I'll just kind of do a quick, summary of how I got into it. And I won't give you the whole long story, but I'll just kind of backtrack a little bit. I was originally in, I guess, high school. I was going to be a concert piano player, right? I was going to play with the orchestra, do performances, like do accompaniments and stuff like that, just be a performer, right? And so I was on that track practicing, 8 to 14 hours a day sometimes, and doing competitions and all those different things. Then I was in a car wreck in 1997.
Wow.
Long recovery, 4-year recovery. Flash forward, I went into the IT field for many many years, and then in 2012, my wife, who is one of my obviously biggest fans and supporters, she was very encouraging. It was like, just go ahead and get the computer rig you're talking about and some of the instruments and just start learning. And so I did. I finally got it in 2012, and then I enrolled in some Think Space classes, some basic ones initially, and then I fell in love with it, and then got their bigger, uh, kind of like course package of music for the media gold, where you get a mentor, which reviews all your work. And so I went through that program, and then initially with the music industry, I went from being a performer, but then being a scoring type of mentality, so scoring to picture. And then I originally started working with student films. That's how I kind of like cut my teeth on scoring to picture outside of ThinkSpace. And so
Yes.
I networked with a bunch of people. And that's really what is most important, I think, early on is like getting out there and meeting like a ton of people, as many people as you can, and just developing those relationships, making some friends, just being out there in the world, letting people know what you do. And so once I did that, my career just kind of like developed and kept developing. I kept scoring pictures. Eventually, I got some feature films. And there's a funny story about one of the films that I did score, which I'll come back around to that. And then in 2019, actually, first, I took a class with Michael Elsner, who is, how to work in the sync licensing industry. And I kind of sat on it for a year, didn't really do much with it until like 2020. And I was like, I got signed by my first publishing company in 2020, actually, first two companies. And so then I started working in the sync license industry. And so flash forward to now, that's 4 years later. So that's a total of what, 11 years in film scoring and 4 in sync licensing side of music. So that's kind of how I got into it. And I think all that information I learned for technology, was really foundational in what I do as a composer now. So without that tech background, life would be a lot more complicated working as a composer in today's world. So I'm really grateful that I went through that IT, learning track in my life, even though it was a total sidetrack. Like that's the winding road I was talking about, right? That took me on a total, left or right turn or whatever. And then I came back around to music, and obviously here we are today.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to actually the student film part. How do you manage working with student films? Because maybe, I don't know, maybe students aren't really known to um, have an idea like where to reach out for the music. Do you find these student films or do they manage to find you? How does that work?
Well, since I was not really known at all, I was just starting when I was working with student films. I actually just reached out through a lot of Facebook and other online like message boards, like the groups and communities. I joined a bunch, and I saw some students asking for people to work on their film, but they never mentioned a composer. And so I just reached out to him. It's like, hey, do you have a composer yet? And then one thing led to another. And then I ended up working with, some students over their college career while I was learning, obviously, with ThinkSpace. And so it's kind of like this nice routine that we had. Like when they had a project, I had a project, and then I kind of like was also working with ThinkSpace and training as well. So I was doing like project after project after project. So I had lots of practice like right away, right? But from what I understand now about talking to other students and like teachers at universities, is that a lot of schools now they have a music department and a film side of it now at the same school. So a lot of them are now working together, which when I first started, it wasn't as common from what I understood. And so I'm sure there's still an opportunity for you to plug into the students who need some help with the scoring. Maybe they haven't found somebody yet, and you can kind of still develop those relationships and help some students out at the same time, kind of a win-win. And so I think that's really important to still look at that avenue.
Yeah, because the reason why I asked, because my first student film when I was at Full Sail University, we created a thesis film or student film, and we reached out to this composer, Alexander. He was part of the Hans Zimmer and Danny Elfman camp. And
Oh,
so
wow.
it was quite an experience and a process to have that sort of talent on our film, especially for like a short student film that was like no more than like 20 minutes. So yet the scoring just sounded so amazing throughout the film, especially through the end credits. He responded to what we were looking for as far as sound. It was like an 80s campy horror type movie, and so he just brought like this 80s type vibe, the 80s
Nice.
horror throughout the film, and in the end credits, it was like this whole 80s like dance techno type thing, and it just sounded so good, and that's why I took on this role as music supervisor because I love like working with composers and artists and instrumentalists just to see like how they could blend their skills to this film. So I thought that was a very interesting experience to witness and hear.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really great that you had somebody of such high caliber working on a student film. That's, I usually don't hear of that. That from my experience, that would be the exception, but that's a really great occurrence. And I'm happy to hear that you had that happen. So that's really awesome. And it sounds like that score is amazing too.
Oh yeah, it was. Check out Motorcycle Ride or Die 2019. You can find it on YouTube. Um, I even know about it because I was working as a sound mixer, and that was my first time ever doing that. That was my first film I ever worked on, first of all, and so I didn't know that they contacted him at the time, and I didn't really get to interact with him. So I just heard his music. So I just thought that would be it just inspired me to be a supervisor and just get more contact with composers because that was that did it for me.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. And that's a good lesson to a lot of people that may be listening as well, is that, maybe they're starting out and they're like hesitant to reach out to somebody that they really admire as a composer. Don't be afraid to reach out. You may catch a composer at the right time, and they might have time in their schedule to do it. And you might be surprised they say yes. But if you never ask, you won't ever know if that was even an option. I mean, originally George Lucas had reached out to John Williams to do Star Wars, and
Mhm.
it was questionable whether or not he would have time in his schedule to even do it. Right. So even that level of composition in film, that still has that kind of dynamic of it has to fit into the schedule. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what would you say was a film or soundtrack, if you haven't mentioned, that inspired you to become a composer?
I always love this question. So for me, it's super easy. It was the original Star Wars soundtrack with
There you
John
go.
Williams. Yeah, the man himself.
Uh,
Yeah, that was the one. I saw that. Actually, my dad was at USC back then, and so when I was
mhm.
like 3 or 3.5 or 4, whatever, like right when that was, they did a screening on the campus before it actually released, and so that's when
Wow.
he took me on campus to see it before it was in the theaters, in '77. So
Oh, wow. That must have been a
yeah,
really nice experience right there. I never
yeah.
heard of anybody say that story.
Yeah, so that's what he told me, and unfortunately, I don't remember that, but that's what he tells me all the time because he was there and he was studying screenwriting and script writing and all that, and so. But I remember the music like really far back, even as a really small child. I can remember that music playing over and over and over and being inspired like from a very young age. So there's it's definitely that score, that first original Star Wars, and my favorite movie, though, of all time, of any Star Wars movie ever, is number 5, The Empire Strikes Back.
There you go. I'm not going to
Yeah.
get into the whole Star Wars thing because I'm not a big Star Wars person. I appreciate it though, but I know there's some big fans that will probably say something else. But I'm gonna let that go. I'm gonna let that go.
That's okay.
Well, for
Hey,
me,
to each their own, man. It's somebody might like the prequel stuff better or Rogue One or, even the Han Solo movie. So,
mhm,
we can all love Star Wars together no matter what your favorite is.
I did enjoy Rogue One. Believe it or
Yeah.
not, I did. I enjoyed that a lot. For me, I would say like you said, like you remember the music like that. The Lion King for me at a young age,
Oh, okay.
I could always name the track and always
Yep.
hum the melodies like note for note, rhythm to rhythm.
Yeah, and Hans Zimmer
It's-
did that one.
oh yeah, he put his foot on that one, and that was crazy because that's his first animated film, I believe, if I remember hearing
I
that from one of his interviews.
yeah, I think that is yeah, I think that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and still to this day, I remember back in 2014 when they released their Legacy soundtrack, and they had scores of every scene throughout the movie, including demos. I was really excited for that because a lot of times, like back then, especially like Disney movies and DreamWorks, they would release soundtracks that didn't have every track of like every scene, and usually they will like combine them into like suites or stuff like that. And
Right, right.
so when the Legacy soundtrack released and I was going off to college, I said, "Oh, I'm all set. I am really set because I was so excited for that. Because there's a whole bunch of like gems in like scenes that I found that like are not released, and I just felt like they were a lot better than this what's already on the soundtrack.
Oh, that's really cool to find that out, and it's an amazing soundtrack. Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. So you mentioned networking. Uh, that's basically how you and I got to meet. We met
Mhm.
at a songwriting camp, Level Up Productions by Brianna Shelko, and I
Oh,
remember
yeah.
meeting her. I met her through uh, Butterby Rocker's indie film festival, and I
Right.
remember I was following Brianna through LinkedIn at first, and then I saw her at the film festival, and I just knew I had to talk to her. And so she invited me to that camp that y'all had here in Atlanta, and
Mhm.
I think that's where I first met you. And then I just saw like everything what y'all was doing, and it felt really good being with musicians and artists like creating. I haven't gone through that experience since I graduated back in 2018 through the music program. So that's why I just enjoyed myself and I enjoyed meeting you, and then we just kept going through other conferences and network events and just
Yep.
gained our friendship even more. So I do want to ask you, what was it about Level Up Productions um, that that attracted you to there, and how you think that your work or that your skills contributed to the songwriting camp?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a lot to unpack with that one. I mean, when I first met Brianna and her mom, they had reached out to me about being a judge for one of the camps. And that's how I learned about the camp. And so as soon as they laid out what their whole, their business was about and the camps were about and what they were trying to do for the industry and for everyone who was a part of the camps, I was immediately hooked. I was like, oh my God, the industry needs this like so bad. And so once I went to the camp, um, I saw the energy, the creative energy, like you talked about, and it was very engaging, and it was very vibrant and energetic. And you know, who was anybody who's a creative would just love that environment. And so I immediately was like, I was a judge at that point because of sync licensing, background in music and scoring and all that, but I wanted to participate, right? Because it was so fun. Like they were all writing and then, recording live, mixing live, finishing it live. And I was like, wow, this is so much fun. And so a couple of things that stood out right away was the not just the creativity, but the professional nature of the event. It was so well organized and well run. And every artist who participates, they do get obviously a split of every track that's created if you're a writer and you participate in the writing aspect of it. And so it's very much everybody is included, basically. Every writer is included. And I really like that because the music industry, as you probably know, is notorious for not doing that, right?
Indeed.
The music industry, unfortunately, was known for undercutting artists and, companies taking what the artist really should be having. And so I found this very refreshing and professional and very ethical and just kind of like almost felt like a reboot of the industry in just like this one section. So it was very, very attractive to want to be a part of that. And so I totally support that. And so that's kind of like my initial impression. And I've been to other camps. I wasn't just a judge after that. I signed up to go to the camps. I even flew down to Miami for one of the camps. And then I was here in Atlanta again. And I couldn't go to London, unfortunately, because that was a
Ah,
trailer camp, right? Because I write trailer music, I wanted to go to the trailer music camp, but I couldn't make it due to scheduling and all that. And so they do these now all over the world. It's not just here in Atlanta. And
wow.
so I thought that was amazing that they can pull together, so many resources globally and do these. It's not just songwriting camp; it's like a sync licensed songwriting camp because they write to real briefs, right? And then the songs get pitched to an actual brief right away. So you're not just making the song and it's sitting in a hard drive somewhere. It's actually going somewhere with a purpose, like right after they're finished. And so I think that's just amazing that they put that together.
Yeah, because I wasn't really too familiar with songwriting camps until, again, I met Brianna. So I thought like the process, especially like with the sync placements and all that, I said like that's a really cool idea, and then how the splits work out and everything. Um, yeah, so I really appreciate like that concept and that process and everything. Um, knowing that I say that you're a film composer, but you still you are collaborating with other artists, producers, and vocalists. What is it that you look forward to when you collaborate with those talent?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I'm sure many people are wondering that as well. So it's something that I look for is first and foremost a professional mindset.
Mm,
Somebody that is even if they're not like been in the industry for a very long time, you can still have a professional nature to the way you conduct your business, right? You respond to emails, you're timely with your deliverables, you're open to creating, you're open to suggestions, you're open to being a collaborator in the true sense of the word. And you don't have like the artist mentality where I'm not changing anything. It's my way or the highway. You have to
right.
have like more of like a, we're doing this together and let's kind of like creatively synchronize our goal. And so I kind of look for those type of things in collaborators, in addition to obviously people who are just like ultra talented with what they do, right? They know what they do. They know how to make deliverables. They know how to do recording. They figured out the technology, so technology doesn't get in their way. There's no excuses, right? If you make excuses and then you can't deliver, that's not professional, right? So you got to have that totally nipped in the bud. And even with voiceover, I used to mention this to people, and with music, is like, you want to make sure that technology is not a factor in why you couldn't do something. So you have to like really spend time on not just the creating music side, but you have to spend time on making sure your tech is right. And you have to spend time on the business side of it as well. And so those are some of the things that with collaborators that I really look forward to make sure, because we have a time frame to get things done in,
Mm.
right? And so there have been times where I have started collaborating with people, and let's say maybe they couldn't get the vocals in time and we missed a brief, right? We couldn't submit to a really high, it was a 200K all in brief that we couldn't submit for because we didn't get the vocals in time.
Yeah.
And every single timeline was laid out, to the artist.
Mhm.
And the reason was, oh, I forgot. Right. So that kind of stuff, you want to make sure that you're not doing that. You want to make sure that if you commit to something that you can follow through. So that's the kind of stuff that is really important when collaborating. And that's what I look for as well.
And that's a very important piece of advice. If you want to commit to something, you have to follow
Yeah.
through constantly. Is
Right.
that's what makes the relationships better and the opportunities more plentiful, I should say. Um,
Yeah. And if you can't do it, just say you can't do it. Say, thank you for the opportunity. I really can't squeeze it into my schedule right now. I'll have a lot more respect for you if you just tell me that up front than the other way, because if you do it the other way and you can't deliver, yeah, you're not going to get a call back. It's like,
exactly, and that's the thing. Like, don't be afraid to say no, that you can't
right,
provide this at this time, because you're not really risking, having this possible connection or network opportunity be squandered. That's more appreciative of you being honest and being transparent, instead of wasting other people's time and opportunities, because then nobody's winning, and then then you definitely lost the opportunity to connect with a really talented person.
right. Or what if your song gets selected in the brief that was a 200K all in?
Mm,
What if that track would have been the one that you got selected for? Right. Think about
right,
that. I mean, that's a lot of money to go around, 2 or 3 ways or even 4 ways.
exactly.
Yeah.
I was trying to remember this question, but would you say when you're collaborating with other talent, um, is it are the decisions mutual in terms of the sound? Or are you when you collaborate, are you making sound solely to fit the artist's talent, or is it vice versa? Well, how would you say that would go in that
So
process?
it's a lot of different types of scenarios, right?
Mhm.
I'll just give one example. When I work with certain vocalists, they want the music completely finished before they even start trying to write.
Mm.
And so I
Wow.
make sure the track is 100% done. And then if we need to make like a melodic change, that's totally open. Like I will go back in if they say, "Hey, I really like to do this melodic change here," and the music doesn't match, I'm going to go fix it to match the melodic change, as long as it's, really good. Obviously, if it's not great, we'll have a talk about it, say, hey, maybe let's try this. But most of the time, I just let the vocalists do what they do because they write amazing lyrics, amazing vocals, and that's what they do. And I already know what they can do before I even do a collaboration with them. So that I don't have to say anything typically. They just send me
Yes.
their vocals, and a lot of time sometimes the vocal stack is already ready, and so I just drop it in, line it up, and it's actually already treated for the most part. And so I usually have to just do a few things here or there, and then there's been a couple times where uh, the vocalist had said, "Hey, can we change a vocal line here or there up front?" But most of the time, I'm just making the music ahead of time, and then we're putting vocals on top of it, stuff like that. There's been a couple times where I've made an entire track, and then we wanted to like shrink it down a little bit because it was too long pretty much for the sync license side of music. They kind of like shorter tracks, 2 to 2:30, 2 minutes to 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So sometimes you'll want to like adjust the length so it's not so long, and so that's been an adjustment that I've had to make as well, because you got to be able to be flexible on all sides. And so that's part of being a great collaborator, is being open to making it work for the project, not just for your vision.
Mm.
Right, because you got to match the brief, not just your vision. So it's like,
Right. That's very true.
right.
And I think when I was at that camp, I think that was the one lesson that I also got to learn as well, because if I remember correctly, I haven't really gotten the experience of music being created from scratch in returns of studio recording. I've only been in that experience when it comes to live band performances, and we got to perform these songs, and so people are creating these originals just to perform live, not for like studio work to release digitally and stuff like that. So it was a very unique experience for me personally, knowing that you're creating these songs, but not solely to like perform live, but to put it out there in public or for these sync placements. So I thought
Right.
that was pretty like unique twist for me personally, and it really helped me open my mind to see like how the process goes and what these musicians are thinking about.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, because that is typically what you see with like a band style. They'll
Hmm.
make it, and they'll perform it. And the music industry has changed over the years. And so, being more geared towards, getting your music synchronized to some type of media, that's kind of like like a newer thing that's happened in the last, I'll say, 15, maybe 20 years. I know a lot of people have been doing this for like 20 years or more, but back in the before like 2010, and even before that, early 2000s, it really wasn't that wide known. It was as it is now. It's changed a whole lot, and the music industry on top of that has changed along with the popularity of working in what's called the sync license industry, right? Which
Um, well, staying on sync then, how would you say the concept of sync has grown? Because you've been living in Georgia for how long now?
oh, I'm from Atlanta.
You're from Atlanta.
Yeah.
So how would you say the concept of sync licensing has grown compared to like way back when?
I'd say that it's grown a tremendous amount. Even in the last 4 years since I've been doing it, really. I mean, even that short period of time, I think it's really just skyrocketed the interest levels, because I've seen so many more people enter in the last 4 years. And to me, 4 years in the music business is nothing. It's like a drop in the bucket.
Right.
Right. Especially with sync licensing, because a lot of people don't know that when you're working in the music industry, and you're trying to work in sync licensing, right, which means you're trying to get your music synchronized to some visual media project. um, it takes a long time to really make that snowball start to happen. You know what I mean? It's a
Right.
long-term commitment. It's more of like a marathon than a sprint. And so I think it's important for people to understand that it's very common for people to work in the sync license music business while they're working in some other area, you know,
Mhm.
until they get
Yeah,
it going.
I think Matthew Steele, our last guest, I think he said the same thing, that this is not a sprint but a marathon, and it's very true. It's very true because there's a whole bunch of artists out there who knows the concept of sync, and they're trying to get their music placed on these films, and so you got to deal with the thousands of artists who are thinking the same as you, and so until you get your opportunity, so all you can do is just keep going and stay consistent and network. And it's
Exactly.
funny that it's funny that you say 4 years, because that seems to be the magic number, because I've only been here for 4 years. I moved here 4 years ago, and when I realized I wanted to be a music supervisor back late in 2019, I wasn't finding any full time, you know, positions within that industry, when I was in Florida, and so I moved to Georgia because obviously the music is very fluid over here. It's very widespread in Atlanta, and but the concept of sync when I first moved here wasn't plentiful as
Right.
it is today. And I was only working side gigs, as doing like some audio work and soundboard operating work, and then now I'm working full time job at auto finance, and I had no education about, but here I am 3 years later. uh, so that's why I just been growing this podcast and just trying to figure out like what it is and learn more about it. But now I've gone to film festivals and I'm meeting music folks here. I was like, okay, now we got something. Now I went to Sing Spotlight. I was like, oh wow, this is really huge, especially here in Atlanta.
Hmm.
So, and now I'm meeting new folks. I'm meeting new artists, new composers, sync agents, music supervisors. I'm already friend of the Guild of Music Supervisors. So I'll go to take trips to LA, go to their conferences. But Atlanta is definitely growing the concept of sync licensing because there are lots of artists down here. There's a lot of producers and a lot of talented ones too. So I'm very happy that the concept of sync licensing um, is growing, and the education of it as well. So I can only hope for more panels and more conferences that are geared to that.
Yeah, exactly. So even you've even seen it in the last 4 years too. So that's
Mhm.
that's great to hear that. And then Sync Spotlight's coming back around. This is
Yep,
coming up March in 25. So that's going to be a
exactly.
really exciting conference here in Atlanta again. And so who
Yes,
knows?
everybody look out for that.
Yeah, I mean Matthew's going to pull some really, really new and exciting guests and panelists. I've already heard a little bit about it. I can't say anything about it, but just be ready.
Yep.
He's going to bring it.
Oh yeah, Matthew Steele, he's always going to hit big, so I can't wait for that. I do want to ask you. You told me that you was a conductor, and for some reason, it just kind of made my eyes open a little bit wider
Yeah.
because it made me remember the time back in middle school and high school, concert band, and all the times playing clarinet. And I always remember my band teacher saying, "Make sure you count, or make sure you look at me. Remember the measures, and then look at me so that you can count better and stuff like that." And so, I gotta ask you, what made you want to be a conductor?
Um, I wanted to learn the side of conducting because I work a lot with orchestra. And so I'm
Nice.
constantly studying how the players play at such a high caliber. And so I thought, what better way to really understand how all of that works in the studio than to actually take some classes in a workshop on conducting, right? So I thought that's
Mhm.
going to be the best way, just total immersion, like feet on the fire, do it or don't, like fail or succeed, so I figured that's what I would do. And so I looked around and I found a program out in LA called LAFCI, run by Angel Velez, who's amazing conductor, by the way.
Okay.
And he, along with Conrad Pope and William Ross, put all this together for composers all around the world to apply to. And then if you get accepted, you fly out to LA and you conduct different levels, working your way up to what they call the Hollywood Orchestra, right?
Wow.
And so that's what I did. I applied to that program and was accepted. I didn't think I was going to get accepted, but I wanted to be accepted. And so I went out there January of 23 to this program, and it's like I would call it like a conducting boot camp almost. It's like it's super fun, but you're like totally thrown into the world of conducting from a piano player. You conduct a piano player playing, and then you conduct a quartet, and then you conduct a college orchestra, and then you conduct the professional, super high level Hollywood, studio players with the Hollywood Orchestra. And that was probably the most intimidating. That was and on top of that, you write a piece and you orchestrate the piece and get it printed, and it gets handed out to all these players eventually, and they play it live for you while you're
That's
conducting your own
nice.
piece. And so I was like, that's got to be a great way to learn the process. And it was. I mean, it was an unforgettable experience. I mean, it really made me appreciate the role of a conductor. And of course, the players, at the high caliber the players are. I mean, they'll sight read at full speed, never have seen it before. Right.
Mhm.
And by like the second take, it gets better. And then the third take, it's like perfect. Right. It's like they're that good. And so it was just amazing. The whole process was amazing. And the teachers were great. The engineers, of course, are top notch because we did it out at Warner Brothers,
Wow.
the Eastwood scoring stage where like Star Wars and Marvel and all these other,
Yeah.
big films have been recorded. And so it's like my little piece is getting recorded with all these pro players at the end. And so it's just an unforgettable experience. Just and the people that I met, I made some new friends, and we still talk, and I get to see their careers grow, and my career's growing, and so we kind of like still stay in touch, every now and then. And so it's kind of like you meet a lot of new amazing people as well. So
I knew I had to ask you that question because you just brought a whole bunch of memories from my time in band and
yeah,
sight reading. Good time sight reading music.
yeah,
I've
because
always wanted to keep my music from like the music sheets that I got from middle school, high school, but unfortunately I had to give it back to my band teacher
yep,
for
they
the
want that
students of
stuff
next
back.
year. Yeah.
uh,
Do you work on projects like on film projects where you composed and had to conduct?
not yet, not yet. Yeah, most of the stuff I've done with orchestra has been in the computer, and occasionally it's been with a live orchestra, but most of the time it's just been what they call in the box.
Mhm.
But I always try to incorporate like a live element to that orchestra, even if it is mostly in the computer. It can be something as simple as finding the budget for a few string players, and you just mix it in, and it gives it that kind of like that more realistic texture. On top of, you still have to know how to write and create and produce orchestra in the computer in a way that it sounds as real as you can make it, even
Mhm.
without, the real players. And there's no substitute for live orchestra. That's like
Right.
the penultimate, recording. And so that's, yeah, I really look forward to when I can write for a film that has a full orchestra budget, and we get it recorded, somewhere, get it professionally mixed, by an amazing orchestra mixer, and then, in the film with the live orchestra. Yeah, that's like still up there.
Yeah, because I
It's gonna
think if I
happen.
remember, um, I think I was watching an interview for Godzilla King of the Monsters 2019. Bear McCreary, I think he composed and also conducts as
Hmm.
well, if I remember correctly. And so I thought that was like really awesome to see a whole orchestra and him conducting it for a film. And just seeing that through BTS is one thing. And I would also like to see that, like in person one day. So maybe I get on a
Yeah,
project where I get to have that, and maybe have you on and witness you
let's do
do
it,
that
man. Let's do
greatness.
it.
Absolutely.
I could totally
Have you
do it.
have you heard of anyone who conducts? Have they been hired to solely conduct an orchestra for a composer? Have you ever heard of that?
Um, yeah. I mean, there's been some cases of that. It's not any projects that I've worked on, but I've heard of other times this has occurred. Even one of the classmates from LAFCI, she went on to conduct this full cycle of like, what is it, performed live to picture,
Mhm.
music for movies, and it's for like Disney, and she's conducting live orchestra for this, like performing to picture in big Hollywood venues and other venues across the world. And so I mean, she's doing that, and so I would imagine that somebody has been called in to conduct for another composer. I'm sure that happens all the time.
Yeah, because that's interesting you say that because I always wondered that kind of process of performing music to picture. And because I say to myself, it's it's kind of a weird concept at first when I thought about it, because at the end of the day, it's probably going to get edited after that.
Well, it probably does, but they try to obviously get it as close to what it's going to be, and then they go and
Mm,
edit it after that.
gotcha.
Like, because when I was at LAFCI, that that boot camp, that workshop that I went to back in 23, we
Mhm.
did do live conducting to the orchestra performing it to picture, and we had to keep it on track. And so we were studying, how that is done with the colored bars as they go across the screen and the
Mhm.
blinking lights. And apparently, this was a technique that was developed by John Williams and the people he was working with at the time, because that was kind of like what
Awesome.
he wanted or something like that. And so I was
Awesome.
learning that system, and it's very effective once you actually learn, you know, how to do it. And then the score that I had was marked up in color as well to match the colors that would come across on the screen. And as I'm conducting, I'm looking at the score, keeping up with where we are in the score and conducting and trying to keep up with all the orchestra members while keeping it on track with the lines and the flashes of light as they go across the screen. So it's very challenging. It's a
Mhm.
lot harder than I thought it was going to be, because you see it,
Sounds
the
like it.
behind the scenes, and you're like, oh, that looks so easy. But when you actually get up there and actually try to manage the whole thing, yeah,
Yeah.
it's not. It's like it takes a lot of practice.
I can only imagine it's like um, playing for a musical in a way, because you're trying to match it to what's going on stage. The only difference is that you're trying to match it as best as possible to picture.
Right. You just have to learn the music and the film and where everything lines up. You just have to learn it perfectly. So you can
Hmm.
almost like flow while you're watching the music, and it kind of just becomes second nature between the score and the lines on the screen and the orchestra and the conducting. It eventually becomes where you don't even have to think about it. You just know it so well that it kind of happens, kind of like muscle memory, when you're performing.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, all right, so I won't keep audiences waiting any longer. I've been holding out for a bit, but we did mention that you were on a Star Wars project, specifically the Clone Wars Battle of the Heroes.
Right.
Um, so tell me how that process came along, who came to you, and how did you approach this project, um, living up to well, also trying to live up to the iconic music history of the franchise.
Ooh, yeah, that was a tough order. But let's start with how it started, right? So
Hmm.
I did not start this project. This project was started by a Ben Johnson out of Hello There Studios,
Okay.
um, over 3 years ago now. At this point, like this is now almost 4 years at this point, but it took 3 years to make the entire thing, and he was the sole animator I learned on this particular movie. Right,
Wow.
one guy did all the animation, and so I was brought on by somebody that I know, Tyler Grow, who was brought on by Ben Johnson. He was responsible for making sure the music aligned with the project, and so the original plan was to rescore everything, right? And so that got really complicated. Tyler had brought on like all these different mock-up composers. They had taken the original scores and they were transcribing and stuff like that. And so it just became too much of a daunting task because, the film itself recreates the lightsaber fight in episode 3 between Anakin and Obi-Wan, right?
Hmm.
But it does not include the cutaway scenes to Yoda and Palpatine,
Okay.
right? Okay. So we had to line up the score. Tyler was lining up the score, and there was these gaps after he took the original music and lined it up to the score, because we wanted it to be exactly the way it was, in the movie. And so we
Hmm.
had to score these rather large gaps to like fill the scenes that didn't exist in the movie. And so Tyler was the official composer on the film. I was the score producer. And so together we approached, writing the score. He did, all the DAW work, and together we would have these live screen sharing and writing sessions together, where he would be writing in the DAW, I'd be listening, and he'd be screencasting through Discord, right? So we could do it in real time. And then other times he would score a scene and then send it to me to review. And this is where I got to tap into my scoring ability, my creative side, is that if something was, say, maybe not Star Warsy enough, or maybe there was a better approach to it, I could provide some insight and suggestions to Tyler. Hey, why don't we try this? Or that sounds perfect. Let's not change it, because there was a time where actually I had said that he scored like part of it. And I was like, yeah, we don't need to change anything on that. And then there's another time where we needed to add like a little motif, like when we see Anakin's face in the desert scene, right as it's changing scenes, we see the camera close up on his face. So we had kind of like done some brainstorming and decided to weave in the Vader motif right there real subtly, right? And so stuff like that we kind of like came up with as a collaborative nature of just working on it together. And so yeah, he would send me what he'd scored with like music and picture together, and then I'd make notes. And like we used we transfer portals, so you can make notes like actually on the timeline.
Right.
And so he would take those notes and make adjustments, and then we do those live screen sharing and live scoring sessions together to kind of refine some of the ideas. And then once he finished writing, he would send his session to me, and I would mix the music and kind of master it, get it all ready and prepped to go over to the mixer for all the effects and the sound effects, who was mixing everything together, right? So there was multiple teams. There was an animation team. There was a whole scoring team they include a lot of different assistant composers, and of course Tyler and myself. And then there was a whole post-production team on top of that. So it's like, and Tyler obviously put together a lot of these teams before I was involved. I got brought into it the last 2 months, and it was kind of like, it wasn't like, we wanted to make sure that the film was scored in a timely way, because it was due by the end of the year. And so it was a lot of hours, a lot of late nights, a lot of revisions. And so, but it was a fun process overall. So that's kind of how it went. Yeah,
That's incredible. That's incredible.
It was so awesome. I mean, this project is so special to me because I'm a huge Star Wars fan, obviously. And, to answer your other question about, how did we approach the daunting task of, honoring the legend, John Williams himself. It was definitely something that was a concern, right? Because not only did we have to score the in-between scenes in a way that would sound Star Warsy and like John Williams, we had to match the production style. And so that took a lot of trial and error when I was doing mixing and when he was writing, and we had to get all the right tones right. The orchestration had to be correct. And then we just managed to make it sound like it was a continuous score. I mean, through the magic of mixing and writing and post-production, it just kind of like happened with everyone like putting in their talents and energy. So it was, can't do it by yourself, that's for sure.
Yeah. That's still amazing. I mean, y'all still managed to kill it. I mean, because I remember at Sing Spotlight when you was on that panel and they showed this clip, this Star Wars clip. I was like, whoa, wait a minute, because I think that this was like my second time actually seeing you in person, and I did not know you worked on this when I first met you at the songwriting camp. So they showed that clip. I was like, I know I didn't just shake hands with a person who worked on a Star Wars project.
No, I appreciate that.
But no, it sounded really good, and I'll take
good.
I'll take this time and moment to just play this clip with audio here. For those on Instagram Live, you won't be able to see it or possibly hear it. You have to wait till the final edit comes out. But just going to play a little bit because I don't want to, violate any YouTube copyright. So just going to play a little bit right here. I mean,
Whew,
the part where
man.
it goes, the part where it goes, bum, ba-da, bum, 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 like it just hits so well. But overall, I always say like there can't be another experience like Star Wars. When you have the combination of the music and the sound effects, that's a whole combination of world building elements in itself, and it just can't
Mhm.
be replicated to a T like this on almost any Star Wars project because it's just on a whole nother level of creativity and talent and everything else that goes along with it. And so to have this and to have your name on this, that's gotta be an amazing feeling, especially just going through this experience and you being a Star Wars fan. I gotta say, like, this is phenomenal work.
No, I really appreciate that, and you definitely are 100% correct. I mean, the first time I saw, my name and Tyler's names and the people that I had worked on this with, all of our names in Star Wars font at the end credits, I mean, I totally was like fanboying out. I was like, it was like a moment. I felt like a full circle moment almost because of, where I started with Star Wars. And I never would have imagined scoring anything Star Wars, but, I hope there'll be more Star Wars scoring in my future. I'd love to still do that. And I'm gonna go back to the other scene. When that scene first starts and continues through where you stopped it, there is music where we scored and original music in there all blended together.
Right. That's
Yeah.
why I was getting at too, because and it just blends in so well.
And those sound effects, I mean, Nicholas did the sound effects. And oh, by the way, there is a behind the scenes documentary that we all created. It's on YouTube. If anybody wants to watch that, it tells about more about how we did it together. But yeah, Nicholas did the sound effects. Like he took painstakingly efforts and time and like made sure every little saber hit and boot click and stomp and punch and grunt was like perfectly aligned, right? And the way he did it was it's very interesting because one of the things he said that he originally had like a lightsaber noise for every hit, but then he realized it was too much, and so he had to, like, selectively pick where to put them to match the motion on the screen. And then, Ben Johnson's animation, oh my god, can we give him, like, some super huge props? I mean, this is like I mean, even if you go into, like, something as detailed as, like, the saber light trail, I love how he did the saber light trail because in the original series, for the Clone Wars, it was more like block movements. Like there was no tail of the lightsaber. There was no bending of the light like it would be. It was all like really choppy moves, like really fast. And to me, this is how I always imagined the fight scenes in the Clone Wars, a little bit more fluid, and like a movie. That's kind of how I was imagined. So I always love how Ben's interpretation of what the fight should look like turned out. I love that.
What's the name of the behind the scenes clip?
Um, I will have to find. I think it's just Clone Wars documentary. I can find it. I forget the exact title.
Just in case anybody in the audience would like to find it.
I'm pulling it up right now. I have it on a playlist on my channel. It says Clone Wars Battle of the Heroes Sound and Music BTS.
BTS. Okay.
And it's on. You want me to say the channel it's on?
Yeah.
Okay, the channel is called The Post Sound Guys.
Oh, found it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna save that on my playlist so I can check it out.
Yeah, it's 55 minutes.
That's okay with me. I work. I work full time. I work from home, so I'll be watching YouTube clips all day. So that's fine with me.
No, that's cool. I hope you enjoy it. We had a lot of fun making it and kind of reminiscing and going back on what we did and, all the fun we had and stuff like that. So, because it released like a year ago this Christmas, right? So
Right.
this Christmas is going to be a year it's been out. So it hasn't really been out that long. And I don't know how many views is it up to now? 4 million, 4.1.
Um, oh
Yeah,
wow. Yeah. In 1
4.1
year.
million views in 9 months.
Oh man.
So yeah,
Um,
we're really happy with that. And I do watch it every now and then. I'll just throw it on again just to kind of like hear it and watch it. And but um but yeah, I mean, I definitely want to score more Star Wars stuff for sure. So if anybody's listening to that, I'm open.
there you go. This man's open. Any more gigs, please reach out to this guy. Um, yeah, I always love watching behind the scenes of the sound and music department. I've been watching a whole
Mhm.
lot more, especially recently. I was watching the Dune Part Two uh,
Oh, wow.
interview
Yeah.
with Hans Zimmer and the director. I mean, there's so much in it in itself. And my favorite part was just like, well, I guess they kind of spoiled it at the interview, but the director just handed Hans Zimmer the script of part three and said, like, here you go. She
Yeah.
said, oh, okay, here we go. We're about to go through it again. Oh man.
Yeah, that was amazing soundtrack, movie. I mean,
Yes.
Hans totally nailed it again. I mean, once again,
Once again.
he brought it home.
I do want to ask you because I've been hearing some of your music on your website, and one of the things that really captivated me was Symphony Number One in C sharp minor. Um,
Oh, wow, that's an old one.
I was gonna ask, what was going through your mind in making that? Because I do want to get into the mind of composers when they make like symphony music like this. So like, tell us like what were you thinking and how'd you pull this one off?
So that's a great question. And, I don't get asked that one too often, but there is a story behind it. That's for sure.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so this one was a really long time ago when I was in ThinkSpace, doing all my studying, right? And
Hmm.
so I will say, I'll give a caveat, a little asterisk now, is I create music and write and orchestrate way better now than that one because there's a lot of timing issues on that one, that you can hear it, and so you'll definitely, if you listen to The Adventure Begins versus that one, you'll hear that the orchestration is like way better now. But
Okay.
what brought that one on was that I had heard this reoccurring melody in my head
Mm,
once, because I was writing and writing and writing. And when I was performing, like way back in the day, in real time and doing all these performances, I actually could like see things in my mind that were musically related, right? And I could hear things outside of what I was doing. So it just started to occur again once I started to practice a lot with the ThinkSpace program. And so I had this symphony-esque kind of, I don't know, mental music playing. And I thought, why don't I just take the time and start notating it in the DAW? Because I was really nervous about it because, well, I wasn't really that familiar at that point with how to do orchestration in the computer, right?
mhm.
But I did it anyway. And so what you heard was what was floating around in my head as this symphony. And so I didn't know what to call it when I first made it. And so I had played it for a couple of people and they said, "Wow, this sounds like something you'd hear in the symphony."
Mhm.
And I was like, "Oh, okay, so I guess I just wrote my first symphony movement," so I just named it that. And so that's kind of how it came about, is more of an exercise in practicing how to orchestrate in the DAW.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of mistakes. Now that I know what I know now, there's a lot of mistakes in it, but I'm not going back to correct it. I'm leaving it as a reminder
Mhm.
for how far I've come.
Yeah, I respect that because I think especially people who are aspiring to be composers, I think they'll really appreciate that just to have it there and not be embarrassed by it, but just see how far you've come because I think it'll be a more rewarding feeling later on, because like you said, you know things way better now. You've advanced your skills, and so when you go back to that and you say, you know what, I'm not going to go back to correct it. I'm not even going to take this down off the website. It's like, I'm going to keep it there. And
Right.
so you know, that's truly respectful. I respect that a lot.
No, I appreciate
And
that. And have my
and
original
someone
scores
like
up
me to
there too.
find it, I like, you know, I appreciate that myself.
And so actually I need to update that page to put more of the newer stuff on there as well as an example of the newer stuff. So, but that's great. You found that. That's kind of like a hidden gem. If somebody does dig in, it's there.
I always do my research. I always do my research.
No, that's a great find, man. That's a great find.
I wanted to head back for a minute because you told me something at this conference that we had the other day um, about sync placements.
Yeah.
How many placements have you had in your career?
Oh, by now I think it's almost 300 at this point.
300. Wow.
Yeah, almost, not quite, not quite.
Almost 300. I mean,
Uh,
so how you keep a consistent um flow of placements, because like you said, this industry is it's a whole marathon and not a sprint.
right. Yeah, it's challenging. I mean, I'll say that. And it's not I don't feel like they're super consistent because they all come in at different times, where they
Mm,
hit. Because you make a track and you send it in, or you do an album and you send it in, you'll never
mm.
know where it's going to get placed necessarily or
Very
how
true.
long it's going to take, right? One of the things that kind of gave me a little bit more of an insight on where it would be placed is that I do write customs for a company. And so when you're writing customs, it's going to a specific project at that time, but it doesn't mean you're going to get your music in that project. So, because I've actually written customs, this is a funny thing. I've actually written customs for a project. That
Mhm.
track didn't get in, but another track that I wrote got in to the custom, right? So
Mm,
it's like, and then that the custom I'm working on now got into another one later. And so it's like you never know what's going to hit the editor or the showrunner in a certain way that's going to inspire them to go, "Oh, yeah, that matches perfectly, but this one doesn't." It's hard to say because even though you work to a brief, you do your best job to match the brief as much as you can, but I would imagine that sometimes even after they hear music that they've asked for, they go in a different direction because they're like, oh, well, yeah, maybe that wasn't quite working right. We need to adjust. And then this track works better. So, that totally happens from a creative standpoint. And, you just have to understand that that's going to happen. And so, one thing I like to always encourage people that are working in the sync license business is to submit it and forget it. You know what I mean?
mhm.
It's like, that doesn't mean you don't track it. That doesn't mean you don't put it in your spreadsheet. You still track it,
Right.
you put it in your spreadsheet, you do your metadata, you put it in Disco, you do all your splits, you get everything notated. But once you get all that done, you just move on and don't even worry about where it's getting placed. Just keep working on track after track and album after album. And
Mhm.
then you want to just keep putting new music out there and you make sure it does hit the brief. And if you're not sure if you're matching the brief, this is where a mentor can come in. You want to make sure that you have somebody, even if it's a friend, that's really critical and helps you out, not somebody that just says, "Oh, everything's great." You want to get that person that's more honest and gives you some real feedback, and then that way you can also kind of like refine, the way you're writing, make sure you're hitting the brief and stuff like that. And so those kind of things will help you land placements better. It's making sure that you are creating music that they're actually asking for and just doing it a lot of it and not worrying about each track, because the artist mentality, you probably know what that is, right?
Mhm.
Right. They
Right.
kind of have like, this is my baby, you can't touch it, this is the
Yeah.
best track in the world, it's got to, you kind of have to like put all that off to the side and have more of the almost like a service mindset, kind of like I'm going to help like a business mindset. Like I'm writing music as a business to fill a client need, and not be so emotionally attached to every single track. Yeah, you should definitely treat it like a business. You should love your tracks, but not be so attached to your tracks that you can't work with it. Like you need to be flexible in a way that, because you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just, you got to just keep cranking them out, on top of that, once you kind of know what you can write, because that's another thing. You really have to master, the genre that you're writing for. And if you can't, until you master one genre, don't add another one.
Mm,
You know what I mean?
I like
Because
that.
that's how I
And
started. I tried to go too wide too fast. And then so I
gotcha.
ended up narrowing it down really quickly through some advice from somebody that I had been studying with, which was Michael Elsner, who I bought that course back in 2019.
Mhm.
And so one of his the master music licensing class, basically, that it doesn't exist now. It's merged into another community called Sync Titan.
Okay.
But basically, he teaches you to really understand your genres and master your genres, and then once you figure out the ones you're good at, you really create music, a lot of music in those genres, and find libraries, or not libraries, but publishing companies that you get an exclusive deal with, right? And then when you have an exclusive deal with them, they're out there promoting your music for different projects, as long as it matches, obviously, what they're promoting. And so when you have the exclusive deal, that does up your chances of getting placements versus a non-exclusive deal. So it's kind of like, it's a little bit of give and take. Treat it as a business. Those are some big tips. And then if you can do customs for a company, that could also increase your chances of getting a placement as well.
Yeah, it's always that necessary piece of advice for artists, especially up and coming artists, to not always be attached to a song, whether if it's whether if it's positive or even negative. Like when I say negative, like, oh, I should make more corrections and stuff like that. You start second guessing yourself, and yeah, you can't always put your energy solely on one project. You gotta have that energy fluid to make more product.
Right. Because here's a good example of something I've run into personally. Let's say you're an artist and you have like this really amazing track, but the dialogue of the track gets in the way of dialogue that would be in a TV show, right? So you need to make sure that as an artist, that you, obviously, you're not changing your artistic nature, but you're making sure that your product can fit into a TV show if you want to get placed. So what that means is, it doesn't mean you have to take out your vocal track, right? It just means that you make your full mix track with your vocals like you normally would, but you have an alternate mix that maybe has no vocals in it, or maybe just like some backing vocals, or like what they call as a TV mix, where it takes out all the melodic lines but leaves all the backing track and some like effects, vocal effects, or you just have no vocals at all. And so when you make all these alternate mixes, um, you increases your chances again of getting it placed, because it's already done for the editors. All they have to do is drop it in. They don't have to go and try to like work with all the stems and then get it all right and mix it and master it. It's already done for them, right? So that also is a great thing from an artist side, that you can make these different mixes. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a great example, and that should be one for people to look out for as they further their career in the music industry. I got two more questions for you, and then we can end this interview. This has been a very great conversation. Really, this has been very awesome. So thank you again, Luke. We truly appreciate it. Um, I think this question would really help others as well, because you live in Atlanta,
Hmm.
especially as someone who's known to compose scores. I know people who live in like places in North Carolina and other places that may not be too music heavily in terms of the market. So, not to say that Atlanta is not, but I'm saying there's probably places that have a lesser music market, and you know, they're just doing what they can. So, what would your advice be? What would be the best way for composers to find opportunities wherever they may be located?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And, I'm constantly asking myself that as well. I'm constantly looking for new ways, to get those new opportunities as well. So this is something that is, you constantly work on this angle of your music business, and treating your music as a business, I think, is one of the first steps of doing what you're describing, because with any business, you have to ask yourself, well, who are my customers, right? How am I going to get new customers? Even if your customers aren't in your city, how are you going to get those customers? How are you going to service your customers? Like if you're in IT, how are you going to service your customers? You could probably go to them. Well, now there's a lot of remote service for even IT that nobody goes anywhere, right? And so with the music business, a great way to find out, or find new clients, is to attend as many events as you can virtually or in person. And nowadays, virtual events are like more accepted as a way of actually meeting people. And like before the pandemic, where people like, what do you mean Zoom? I'm not going to hop on Zoom to meet somebody and then work with them. That's like crazy. But since the pandemic happened, we all had to do that and figure out how to make it work. And so attending virtual events, where they have these, like on Zoom, for example, they have these breakout room sessions or workshop rooms where you can actually talk to people and then network with people in real time. So this is a great way to meet people if you're in a city that doesn't have a lot of music opportunities. So that's one way. Another way would be to save up some money, budget into your business that you're going to fly somewhere, right? And so that's what I did with LA. I saved up my money. I flew out to the workshop, made a bunch of connections, and then obviously had some training at the same time. Or if you want to fly out to PMC, which is an annual event called the Production Music Conference, that's another great way to really meet a lot of people in the sync license side or production music side of the industry, because that's what sync license is a lot of. It's a lot of production music, right? It's not just artist music on Spotify. And so these are a couple of ways that you can really expand your client, your clients that you serve, as well as making some friends, letting people know that you are in the industry. And then you can also make content and put it out there on YouTube or another platform, and people will find that content. It's a little bit slower to grow your business that way, but it is used as a marketing tool, so it can happen. And then word of mouth is another great one. Like you can always ask your clients to say, hey, do you know anybody who's looking for music? They're usually more than happy to like point you in the right direction. And then if you've done a great job for your clients, they're going to tell people anyway. And then you can do all the work remotely, you know, even if somebody's over in, I don't know, over in Europe or something, or in Japan or wherever, you can work on films now from your house in Lilburn, you know, with people over in Australia, you know, or wherever. And so these are just some of the ways that, I've even kind of reached out to people as well. And then I think another great way to meet people and to network and to uh, be a professional about it is to use LinkedIn. That's a great platform. IG is another great platform. It's a lot of business folks are on there as well. And so I think as long as you keep it professional and respectful of people and, their time, and, don't be overly pushy, and, kind of just be of that service mindset and say, hey, how can I help you? What are you looking for? That kind of thing. And just introduce yourself in a you know, short little, email, not a whole entire book about, how you started when you were 5 playing something or whatever. Those type of things can help you grow your clients and your business. And then over time, like with any business, you will gain more clients and have repeat business and so on and so on.
Yeah, I totally felt the budgeting, especially because I've been saving up money because I work full time, and so it's helped
Yep.
me take trips to LA for any sort of networking opportunities. But uh, COVID really, the pandemic truly changed the world, and especially for networking opportunities, it seemed to make it more easier because you don't have to always fly out anymore or go any long distance. You can just do it at the click of a button on your laptop or your computer or your phone, and you can finally talk to the people that you want to network with. You can gain mentorship there.
Hmm.
Now, the Guild of Music Supervisors, they have these online events that you may want to go to,
Right.
or
Right.
whatever. So it's truly there are truly now multiple ways now to network, and they're very useful useful resources now because of the pandemic. So I truly appreciate, because I think I got to know you, or like how we're having this conversation. We're doing this virtually. A lot of
Right.
times podcasts will do this in person, but now I kind of sort of like adapted to the point to where it's like everything's online. So I not just one create a podcast like everyone else did during the pandemic, and now two, I just invite my guests online. And so yeah, it's truly there are truly now more effective ways to communicate and network with someone. And so hopefully everybody got to hear all that and take note and everything. And I agree that LinkedIn is very important. As soon as I
Hmm.
put aspiring music supervisor on my profile, next thing you know, I had a whole bunch of artists connecting with me and pitching me their music, and I got like 900 connections in like under a year. So
Right. Right.
I was like, oh, wait a minute, I have to get used to this.
Yeah,
So,
you do.
so, so yeah,
Yeah.
LinkedIn and social media presence truly will definitely help you, especially if you're wanting to be in the entertainment business in the music industry. It truly does help. So one more
Absolutely.
question to cap this off, and I ask this question a lot to all my guests.
Oh.
If if you were to create your life soundtrack,
Oh, yeah.
what elements would you include,
Hmm.
and what point of your life would you be wanting to emphasize? This includes goals, struggles, your personality, whichever.
So that's a tough question to answer. So I guess the elements would obviously be Star Wars elements, and it definitely would be a culmination of a lot of Star Wars music, movie scores. Obviously, there's some Brian Tyler scores that would probably be included in that as well. Some Hans Zimmer stuff, some Danny Elfman scores would be in there for sure. And I would say the score would almost be like the life that I've had already. It'd be super dynamic, and it would touch upon so many different areas of life: the happy times, the challenging times, the times of struggle, all those different areas. The A wedding, birth of our son, all these different happy moments. Just different celebration type things. There would definitely be some triumphant Star Wars, fanfare music at certain times, and some Darth Vader type scores, for the challenging times, stuff like that. And even that Kylo Ren theme would probably squeak its way in there, even though he's no Vader.
Oh my gosh, I can just hear this soundtrack. This sound is gonna be all over. When you say dynamic, I can definitely see this is gonna be so dynamic. I can
Yeah.
already just hear that French horn playing in the background.
Yep. And then think about, oh yeah, I'd have to pull in the Jedi Fallen Order soundtrack, the Jedi Survivor soundtrack. I have to pull in some Franz Liszt, some Beethoven, some Mozart, some Chopin, some Rachmaninoff would all be in there. Lots of different things, romantic music, all different things, so
Do
many
you have
different.
a? Oh, sorry. Uh, do you have a favorite or preferred instrument that you like to work around with?
Yeah, it'd probably be
Or
piano. Yeah.
piano? Yeah.
Yeah. I don't always start with the piano when I'm writing. Sometimes I'll start with the cello.
I love the
So my
cello.
favorite string instrument is probably the cello, and then viola would be next. So they're kind of like tied at times depending on what I'm working on, but those are my two favorite string instruments. And then of course piano would be number one instrument altogether.
And how would you usually when you start off with these instruments, uh, and you add the technical elements to it, how do you formulate that?
I mean, like, how do I approach the writing style?
Yeah. Hmm.
Oh, okay. Well, it depends on different projects, right? So if I'm writing for, let's say, a crime show thriller type music brief, right? It's going to be different than writing for a crime show thriller score if I'm scoring to picture, because I'm going to have the visual assistance and cues that I have to work with, the timing, the pacing, the different hits that the visual aspects have to line up with for the score. Well, if I'm writing to a brief, I don't have all that, right? I just have the description of what they're looking for. And sometimes you might get a scene, like they really don't even tell you the scene. They just tell you kind of a general, we want thriller crime show style music, and if they give you a reference track, that's great. It's not always a reference track that's a movie or to picture, right? It's not always just like a show with, music in it. Sometimes it's just the music. And so it really depends. Like if I'm writing, that's how I would approach to two different things to write for. And then music instruments, I've started with a pulsing synth before when I'm writing thriller crime show music, not not the strings, not the piano, but then at other times I've been playing around the piano first for the crime show music to create like a motif to get into the mood. And usually something pops into the mind first, like, oh, I have an idea, let me try it. And from that little idea that comes from a technical aspect of writing, because I know what it should sound like when it starts, right? It usually starts off with like a low, quiet motif or a pulsing synth or a constant string that's coming in and out. So I'll start something like that. And then everything kind of just snowballs from there. And the ideas just start clicking.
Wow.
So
Okay, that's dope. I know I asked you two extra questions, but
it's
with
okay.
that being said, with that
It's,
being said, this is very great conversation, great insights from your mind and from your background, for your knowledge, and this is why I love having these conversations and using these platforms to hopefully help someone who's aspiring to be in your position. So I
right.
truly appreciate your time and truly appreciate your knowledge and your words and your time. And so, with that being said, this has been the Playlist Shuffle podcast, our premiere lounge talk with film composer Luke Truan, a good friend of mine, great person, great talent to work with. If you got a Star Wars project, please reach out to this man. He knows exactly what he wants to do with Star Wars. He's a Star Wars fan, and truly a pleasure to meet you and be your friend, Luke. And hopefully we can collaborate one day on a project. I know my friends are filmmakers, and everywhere it's that's relationship where wherever they go, I go. Wherever I go, they go. So one day, hopefully, we would love to have you on. And since I already have a good idea of like what your style is,
Right.
the process should be pretty simple.
It probably will be at that point. I appreciate that. And I look forward to collaborating, of course. And thanks again for having me on the show. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, for everybody. Please, if you're a fan of the show, if you want to send your comments, if you want to like, share, subscribe this, please go on our social medias on Instagram, on YouTube, our Spotify, our TikTok. We're looking to post more on our TikTok page at jmalley_guy. Our YouTube is the Playlist Shuffle Podcast. Our Instagram is the Playlist Shuffle Podcast. And also you can find me on LinkedIn at Jeremiah Moss. So please go follow those platforms, and please tell a friend to tell a friend, and share the content. Please like, subscribe, and comment. I'd like to hear your thoughts and opinions about what y'all have been hearing so far. And is it truly helping you? What more would you like to see from this platform? But until then, folks, this has been the Play the Shuffle podcast. I'm your boy Jay Malley, featuring Luke Truan. And please have a great weekend. Have a great Saturday. Have a great Sunday. Go Yankees! Yankees in 6. We'll see you later, folks.